I'm here with Coach David Hicks, and today with our baseball talk, we're going to talk about program building. And the first question I have for you, Mr. Hicks, is what are some of the foundations you have used to build a successful program?
I think the first thing you have to do is come in and lay down what your beliefs are. You have to find a way for your assistant coaches and your players to believe in what you're doing and fall in love with the logo or fall in love with your belief system. And once they do that, and there's more than one way to do a lot of different things, but if you can have buy-in and belief and all have a common goal working towards the same thing, that's your first starting point.
Yeah, I've definitely being around some of the trust the process stuff, and actually seeing those kids buy into that and just trust. I know especially those 18, 19 years, those kids were, I guess, considered your kids. Those were the first time you had kids for 4 years. They were bought in. What was that feeling of seeing that buy-in or that trust the process mentality?
Well, I think the first thing is you start seeing them just grow as young men and grow as athletes. And once their bodies start maturing and they get to that physicality of where they can actually do the things naturally or of what they've been trying to do from the time they walked in the door as an eighth grader, as a freshman, and by the time they start getting to juniors, seniors, their bodies are strong enough to actually do what you've been teaching them or what they've been working on from day one, and it just like all of a sudden it starts clicking and you can see their faces light up, and it's all that years of muscle memory and doing the things over and over again, and you can just see their faces when they feel it, and you can tell in your mechanics and what you're doing if it feels right or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know I walked into my first year as a coach, and I told my kids three things: we're going to love, we're going to serve, and we're going to be gritty. And so when I explain that to my kids, I'm really in depth. So if you was to explain to the people, trust the process, where did that come from? What inspired that? Kind of like, what was your thinking in this is what our logo is, this is what our brand is. So what inspired trust the process?
Well, for me, when I went and I started into baseball and you evolve as a coach, my first few years as a baseball coach, maybe my intensity was a little higher than maybe what it should have been for baseball. But I really started following a gentleman by the name of Brian Kane. I read a lot of his books, studied a lot of his stuff, and then I went into the one-pitch warrior, and you start worrying about one play at a time, one pitch at a time, trusting what you're doing. Don't worry about the outcome, worrying about the moment. Be where your feet are, and just believing in that, and the outcome will take care of itself if you believe in the process of what you're doing each time.
Absolutely. So now I'm going to shift away from that, and I feel blessed in terms of seeing the evolution of the coaching career for you from 06 to 14 in baseball and then now in basketball. 06 is my sixth grade year, so I literally missed you by 1 year taking this program over. So what was it like to inherit that below 500 team and kind of envision where you wanted to take them? Because if we really look at it, you took a pretty freshman-led team to an above 500 record. So how did that transition from 06, we're below 500, what was your vision going forward to get to where you were in 2014 with the above 500 teams?
Well, everybody worries about winning. Everybody wants to look at the scoreboard, and everybody wants to talk about records. But I think when you go into a process of trying to rebuild or trying to, maybe not every day you're trying to rebuild, but you're trying to change thought processes, you're trying to change what they maybe have done previously with the staff before you, is you just worry about getting better. You worry about every day you're better. Nobody remains constant. You're either better or worse each day. So you have to be, today's term or the cliche that people like to use is be 1% better today. But you always just want to grow each day, get better. And when you start doing that, you start seeing their work ethic change. You start seeing how they approach the field, how they carry themselves.
Absolutely.
You can tell whether their shoulders are back, their chin's up. You know, that I used to talk about, and you probably heard me talk about 1 inch. You know, that 1 inch of your chest being sunk in a little bit, or you shoulders back, your chest puffs out 1 more inch. It changes a whole different presentation of how you're viewed when you get off that bus or when you walk onto the diamond.
Absolutely. I know I preach to my kids that their individual success will bring team success. And when I'm referring to that is, you know, a lot of the kids that I'm talking to haven't even processed going to college to play baseball. Kind of when you took over Fairfield, that wasn't an everyday thing. We weren't just thinking, all right, this, you know, we got a shot. So I think when we really started talking college, I think, like you said, you see that work ethic change. You see things change, and you see somebody believing in them that, hey, you can do this. You just got to put your mind to it. So with all of that, who would you say is the most influential person on your coaching career?
Well, I think you take a little bit of everybody that you've been around, and you know who you are because of what you've been a part of. I've been fortunate and blessed to have some mentors that are Hall of Fame coaches, not necessarily in baseball, but basketball. I've been around some, you know, I've worked for, I guess, 5 different athletic directors, 4 different head coaches, 4 or 5 different principals, and a lot of times you take things from your administration that's not necessarily on the athletic playing field or court. So I could go through the list and tell you what I've taken from each one of them. I don't know if there's, for me, just because I've been fortunate enough to be around so many different people in different sports, I don't know if I can say one person has really been my true inspiration or motivator to do things.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I can mention your names of Lloyd Gardner, Stan Harden, Butch Greshel, who was the well-known athletic director back when I played, right, that everybody still talks about now 30-something years later.
For sure.
And how he did get the entire athletic department to buy in and believe in a logo and buy in and love the logo.
Yeah.
So I think your biggest battle is not just what you do every day, but it's how you approach the day with your people that surrounded you. And you're only as good as who you surround yourself with.
Oh, absolutely. My mom was such a believer in it took a village. And if I look back on my village, I know from 10 years old forward, it was definitely prepped, you know, for this moment. I know that they were givers, they were teachers, they were loving. So if you had to just talk to any former player right now, any of your baseball, basketball, what would you think they would say the one thing you instilled in them would be?
I think work ethic, mindset. You know, for me, Tabor, it's as I get older, and now I'm probably on the back side of a coaching career instead of climbing to it. Is you used to worry about that career record. You used to worry about where you ended the season, and you still do because you compete. Everybody wants to compete. But for me, as I get older in this, my championships are when I have a former player graduate college, when I have a former player go on to play at the next level, and they come back and see me, and then they reminisce and talk about what the things we did or what we were teaching them back then carried over and helped them be successful at the next level. And then it goes beyond that. You know, now on Father's Day, I get text messages from previous players, Happy Father's Day. I get pictures sent to me when they had their first newborn baby or when they had their wedding pictures. Those are really, truly what the championships are about. It's the records and the trophies and all that and things that get people into Hall of Fames. But for me, my championships are my past players being productive citizens and telling these young men that they have to be my goal is for them to be somebody that can be depended on and counted on when they become men and have their own families.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the one thing I've heard from many consistent guys is just, and then Pat Summitt said it best, you know, they don't care what we know until they know how much we care. And, you know, I can speak on several occasions where, especially as a teenager, you might not value your coach laying into you, your coach ripping your butt or making you run your foul post or making you holding you accountable. But then when you become an adult and you see it in the real world, you're like, gosh, these people had no accountability. These people had, they didn't have a coach to hold them accountable.
When that happens, a lot of times people don't realize how much you carried until they're gone.
Absolutely.
You look back and then you understand why things were done a certain way. And I can say that over my course of coaching, some of the young men that I coached the hardest and I was probably the most brutal on a daily basis are some of my closest to, and I keep in contact with the most.
Absolutely. So I'm going to shift gears away because I feel very called to ask you this. So in 2014, you made the decision you was stepping away from baseball. And I think a lot of people that shook, they knew you had this program going in the right direction. We knew everything. But I want to talk about the passion side of this because I've known you for some time and I know how passionate you are just in general as a competitor, as everything goes. But just talk about following your passion and the decisions that it comes with making tough decisions. Because I know I've been put in a lot of situations where it's been make this decision and now I have one path to go. So what was that like for you just to make that decision of passion on, this is what I've wanted since I was a kid or a teenager to now it's time to fulfill this dream?
It's tough. During that process, I was Greg Longacre's assistant coach and been his assistant for 9 years. And at that same time that I was also the head baseball coach for 9 years. I'd coached 2 sports for 19 years. And I'd always loved basketball. And like I mentioned before, I was probably a little too intense in the coaching box at third when I took over as a head coach.
I would say so.
And you learn as you mature and you do that maybe you got to pull the reins back on yourself a little bit. Baseball's not basketball where you can run up and down the sidelines and be so aggressive, I guess, for lack of better words. And so you do both sports. And during that time, I was married, I was starting a family, and I missed a lot of my son Dalton's, I guess, first years of baseball. Missed a lot with my daughter. But you still have that passion to compete both sports. And Coach Longacre decided that he was going to step away and retire from coaching basketball. And I got that phone call that night, and I can't explain the different emotions that went through because, baseball was a program that I felt like we were moving in the right direction. We had not achieved what I wanted to achieve. We'd had success. We'd beaten some really good programs and started gaining respect in this area. And I think we'd started gaining respect across the state. I made a focus that we would travel the state and go play different regions, 5th region, 8th region, 3rd region, and I wanted my guys to get exposure and be seen by people across the state for possible state votes. And so we were gaining that respect. So you have to make a decision. Do you want to continue building what you'd been working so hard for, or attempt to go to basketball full time, which you'd have loved? And I'd had success, as a player and played with some All-Americans and been a part of state championships. And so I think I always tell you all, and you've heard me tell you, have a plan. Think it through. So I'm a lot of floating notes and a list maker. So I would make lists, my pros and my cons of moving over to basketball full time. And I think there's 2 things. One, I won't speak on today about why I made my decision to go to basketball. It's bigger than what needs to be talked about today. But then I think the number one thing that deciding, just other than just wanting to be successful in basketball and go coach that, my passion was, because don't get me wrong, I love baseball. Right. Baseball is a pure sport. It's a beautiful game. There's no other game like it. But my family came down to it.
Absolutely.
My kids were young. I'd missed a lot. So by just focusing on basketball, it changed the seasons that I was so active. It let me be a part of my kids' youth softball, baseball. I got to coach a little bit at that lower level and go back down there and enjoyed those moments with family. I just got to. I think that was the driving force of, without speaking on everything, was that. And
Absolutely.
it was hard,
Yes.
During that time. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep for a long, long time.
Oh, I remember. I remember running foul posts when you were doing college work because
My-
I'd come off a knee surgery.
It was tough on my family. I ended up on blood pressure medicine and a lot of different things just because of stress. And that got better when I finally made my decision and moving forward. And I still fight with that sometimes. What if I'd have stayed with baseball? But somebody I think a lot of, and not even really in my circle of coaching, was discussing it with me one day because he was shocked that I hadn't that I'd made the choice that I did. And I just told him that I wasn't finished with what I wanted to do, and it still bothers me. And he said something to me that I'll never forget, and I use it a lot sometimes with people, and it kind of put me at ease and made myself feel better about my decision, I guess. And this was actually a couple years after I'd switched over, and he told me, he said, David, he said, oftentimes you don't get to enjoy the shade from the tree that you planted.
Absolutely.
So that kind of put me at peace that maybe what I was doing on the baseball side of it was right. We weren't great. We hadn't, but we had broke through that threshold, I think, of moving in the right direction. And so that's where I am today now, 2020, and you live with your decisions. And I'm still happy with my decision. It was the best move for my family, and
Absolutely.
I've got to be around another group of coaches that I'm fond of, and it's been really good.
Well, thank you, Coach Hicks, for your time, and we appreciate you being here with us on Athletic Talks.
Thanks for having me, Tabor. Hopefully it was beneficial to somebody, and I enjoyed it. I want to tell you I'm proud of you and what you're doing, and I was looking forward to watching you this year as a first-year head coach, and with what we've got going on in the world with the coronavirus, it stopped a lot of things for athletes, for coaches. It changed people's lives completely, and we're experiencing something that I think these kids, they'll have something to talk about for years and tell their grandkids, and I just hope that we don't have to experience something like this in the future.
Never again.
It's
Never again.
But we also have to remember that, each day I talked about to the kids that someday the ball's going to stop bouncing. And most of the time, the intent of that is to let them know that, sports won't always be there to carry you along. And maybe when you get old, that stops. But in what we experienced is it stopped a lot sooner than anybody realized, for everybody, not just people getting older or not being able to go on and play at the next level. It just stopped and came to a sudden stop and made us realize that sports aren't maybe the most important, and it let us realize how much we make our lives evolve around sports.
Yep.
And it allowed us to be with our families more, and that's been good for, I think, a lot of us.
Oh, yeah.
But we also are ready to get back to whatever that new norm may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And grind each day, and I miss getting to see people, see my past players, my colleagues, but I've rambled enough. I appreciate you having me, and thanks, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Coach.